All right, guys. You know what? I was thinking about blog posts recently, and I mentioned my blog a couple of times. Philosophy sucks. Maybe one of these days I'll tell you the story about how I started that blog um, back in 2007. But I wanted to take you today back to 2006, 15 years ago. The young Richard Brown, a graduate student, a young man, just starting to learn how to teach. I was teaching a class back then on philosophy of religion, and we were talking about the problem of evil. This was the fall semester of 2006. And one of my students who came up to me afterwards asked if I would do a debate with some organization that they were affiliated with. And they organized a debate with someone whose name was the Reverend John Rankin. And I didn't know this person, but they have something called the Theological Education Institute. And so we had a debate November 9th, 2006. This was an in-person debate. And the topic was, if God exists, then why is there evil? Now, I wrote up my opening remarks, which I presented at this meeting, and I posted them on my blog under the title Freedom and Evil, which was the title of my presentation. So basically, the line that I was taking, in which I still think that no one has really presented a good, compelling case against, is the idea that God, it would be very easy for an all-knowing, morally perfect, all-knowing, all-powerful, morally perfect being to create creatures that always freely chose to do what is right. And since that is not the case, there are cases where we freely choose not to do what is right. This is inconsistent with the idea of God, because it could have been the case that we were a different way and God didn't make it that way. Okay, so now the way that I thought about this was like, there's lots of stuff that we cannot do, but yet I'm say that I'm free. So I can't stop myself from falling as I'm falling off the Empire State Building. I can't turn myself into a frog, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are even moral things I can't do, like travel back in time and stop Hitler from doing what was done, et cetera, the Holocaust, and so forth and so on. So there are many things which are, it's just not possible for me to do them. And nobody takes that as a reason to think that we don't have free will. So the lovers of free will out there never say things like, I can't fly to the moon, therefore no free will. Now, myself personally, I always thought that was very strange, because those things I felt very limited by. I felt very limited by those things. I think the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, I think the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre put it nicely, that there's a kind of coefficient of adversity that the world presents us with, a kind of pushback when we try to do things. You know, for instance, I've been trying to learn how to skateboard again, and it doesn't always go well, and the world's pushing back on me in a certain way that's out of my control. And no one says that I am not free, right? I choose to do the various things that lead up to it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so the line of thought that I pushed was, why couldn't have God made the world like that, but made the immoral actions ones that you can't choose to do? So for example, I can't choose to stop falling as I fall to my death. So why can I choose to murder an innocent person? Why is that something that I'm able to do? Now, yes, I have free will, so I have to make choices. There have to be options. But why does one of the options have to be that I'm able to murder someone? And instead of making murdering someone like stopping myself falling or flying to the moon? just make it impossible. It's just something that cannot be done for whatever reason. And so I think that this is a pretty serious objection, which hasn't really been met with any response in the last 15 years that I've been paying attention to this stuff. I haven't seen any real addressing of this kind of issue, except insofar as people say, like Plantinga and his followers, they say that's not real morally significant free will. So they might say, look, maybe that's a kind of free will. You're having free will in this world that we're conceiving of. I'm choosing to drink black tea instead of green tea. Delicious. I'm choosing to wear this shirt instead of that shirt. I'm choosing to have this fucked up haircut instead of that fucked up haircut. But in this world, I can't choose to strangle someone to death. It's just not possible for whatever reason. You can imagine 1,000 trillion different ways that it might not be possible. But anyway, so it's just that their response is, yeah, you may have free will in that world, but you don't have morally significant free will, because morally significant free will is the ability to do immoral actions and refrain from doing them. Notice in this world, you can still do moral actions. And so you could still help people across the street and, donate to charity. It's just that you couldn't commit an immoral act on your own, but you could do moral actions. And so you could still have a system of rewards if there were a God. You still have a system of rewards and punishments. You just have to change what got punished. So instead of punishing the people who do immoral actions, you punish the people who don't do n number of moral actions or something like that. And you're off to the races with the whole everything you want. It's just you make this thing impossible to do. Okay, so that's wonderful. You could still do moral actions. I lost my train of thoughts, but you couldn't do anything immoral. So there still would be a kind of morally significant free will in that respect. But the objection is that since you're not able to murder or do any of the other heinous acts that people do, would you even be able to lie? Like that's an interesting point. Is lying really that immoral? That it would be forbidden in this world? If you're Immanuel Kant, maybe yes. In other cases, maybe no. So I think that if you're a utilitarian, maybe in that world, some lying would be permissible. Who knows, right? So I think you'd have to hash all that stuff out. Let's just assume that you couldn't lie or anything like that, right? Just for make it easier. If all that stuff was impossible, so if you're, sorry, I back up. So if you allow all those immoral things, then is something gained in that world? So in that world, you now have the possibility of someone desiring to do something immoral and not acting on it, instead of it being impossible. Like I desire to fly to the moon and I don't act on it. And that is something I've desired. Like, why can't I fly to the moon? That seems ridiculous. Of course, rockets and all that stuff, but it's just, I would like to just like fly up there. It's annoying, or at least it was annoying to me as a kid, that things like that are not possible. What was that book? I read a book where this all really came out at me. What was it by? It was the guy who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull. You guys know that book? It was called Illusions. Hey Siri, who wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull?
Richard David Bach wrote Jonathan Livingston
Richard
Seagull
Bach.
in 1970.
Yeah, okay. So this is a different book by that same author called Illusions, and in it he talks about, breaking through of reality, and he could walk through doors and all that stuff. And I was like, yeah, why isn't reality like that? It sort of does what the fuck I want it to, instead of telling me what to do all the time. But I still think I'm free, right? So even though I can't do all those things, I still think I'm free. I still think I could have morally significant freedom, but they think something would be gained in that world, right? That there'd be something morally valuable in that world. So I like to think about a comparison case. So suppose you have two worlds, world A and world B. World B is like our world. There's this kind of free will, if there is, and we can choose to do horrible, immoral things if we want to. Then world A is like ours and having free will, but the horribly immoral things are impossible, whereas the moral things are perfectly possible. Some moral things are not possible, like I can't save you from being tortured to death, because being tortured to death is not possible, just like I can't save you from flying straight into Venus with your bare arms, because you can't do that, right? So those things wouldn't be possible, but these other things would, like, going above and beyond, and helping people when you don't want to, and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so now you were comparing these two worlds, and if you're a god, you know that these two worlds are options. You're looking at the way the space of possibilities is laid out before you, and you're saying to yourself, as an all-powerful, all-knowing, morally perfect being, which of these two worlds should I bring into existence? In the one world, you have someone who chooses not to murder, and in the other world, you have someone who is unable to murder but chooses to help their friend move when they don't really want to, chooses to tell the truth, even though it would be uncomfortable, and they could like not answer the question or avoid it or something like that. So you have these two, and God says that world should be allowed because it's more valuable that the person chooses not to murder or torture someone to death, whereas over here they don't do that. There's where the argument loses me. I don't really understand. I see why someone choosing not to murder is a nice thing, but given that that most people are not going to choose that, it does start to feel like a Squid Game in a little bit. It's like, yeah, okay, winning all that money is a nice thing, but going through the process where most of the people are not going to survive, and you're just watching it play out, that does seem a bit strange when there's a nicer option, which is just to give them what it is they would like, as opposed to having to see, well, but I need to know, like, whether you would make this choice or not. And on some accounts they already know and all that. Anyway, so this line is the only response I've ever seen, is that you would lose the morally significant will. And it starts to really sound strange when you spell out the details, when really what's missing is just the ability to do these horrible things, which most people will fail at, and which seems knowable already. Not to mention that if you could know, like, this middle knowledge stuff, these counterfactuals of freedom and all that stuff, if you could know all that stuff in addition, then you could only create the people that would make the right choices, right? I don't know. So there seems to be multiple sort of issues. Not to mention the fact that, like, how many so let's suppose you're not a murderer or torturer or a rapist, you're a decent person. How much of that is due to luck? I think once you start thinking about luck considerations, have you ever encountered a situation where you needed to make a choice that something really important happened? And if you did, yeah, I don't know. These issues are complicated. But I am curious what people think, whether my comparison scenarios, where you have the case where you have free will, but you can't do anything morally reprehensible. Maybe you could do minor immoral things, but nothing morally, like murder, rape, torture. In the other world where you could, why is that one more valuable? I am curious to hear what you guys think about that.